Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation. So for all you Audie fans, he's currently outside, but I am absolutely going to dish the dirt on that boy in this video. So why don't we start with, I went into the hospital Monday, and you all know that. I have my left knee replaced. Obviously, things are going okay. I mean, I'm still here making videos. I wouldn't mind if I were a little more comfortable in the process, but hey, it is what it is. And in maybe a week, 10 days at the most, I will be walking around normally again, and this will all be forgotten. So I'm not complaining. Things are going well. But my boy, I knew I was going to be gone for a little over 24 hours. And I thought about, asking Jane to come over and keep an eye on him. And she did, in fact, text me a couple of times while I was in the hospital to find out if I wanted her to do so. But it wasn't at all necessary. And Audie takes shameless advantage of her. He will tell her nobody ever cuddles him. He's never gotten to eat a full meal ever. No one ever gives him treats. And I make him scrub the floor every week. It's not true. None of it. But he will suck Jane in, and she will give him treats, and he is happy. She will snuggle him, and when he bites her when she tries to leave, which he does, because he thinks that's a sure indication that he wants her to stay. I've tried to persuade him that's the fastest way to chase someone out a door, but he doesn't believe me. So when he bites her, she'll put him back in her lap and pet him more. And yes, I am not the only person spoiling that cat rotten. But before I left, I put about 3 days worth of food in his dish. I made sure he had plenty of fresh water and 40 pounds of brand new litter. I wasn't going to be gone more than a day. In fact, as it turned out, I was gone 30 hours. And for those of you who have followed the Audie saga, you know that every spring he takes a walkabout, and last time he was gone 37 hours, but it's okay because that was him. This was not okay because it was me. So I come back, the food dish is completely empty. He ate every bite of food. That was 3 days worth of food, and I'm still convinced that I am going to find a puddle of cat barf behind the chair or the sofa. I haven't yet, but I'm sure I will. Because that was simply way too much. So, of course, he screamed at me the whole first day, just yelled. He had not been amused, and he needed me to know it. However, by the first night, I guess his desperation outweighed his irritation. So, of course, he hopped up in the bed and snuggled me. And then I realized what the problem was. He kept rubbing against me. He kept sniffing. In particular, he was sniffing my leg, but he was sniffing everywhere and rubbing against me. I didn't smell like him anymore. I smelled like the hospital. And he had to get rid of that because that smell was wrong. That's not what I'm supposed to smell like. I'm supposed to smell like him. He's supposed to smell like me. When I give him a bath, I'm supposed to put my perfume on him. And then, when I get out of the shower, he gets to rub up against me to get his smell on me. That's just the way it works in the mind of a little cat. So that went on for like 2 days. Insane drama in the daytime and way too much snuggle at night. But he does believe that he is taking care of me. He curls up in bed with me and he will stay, even if it's hot. And I know he does not like to be hot. He and I have that in common. If it gets hot, he starts begging me to turn a fan on. If it's January and he wants that fan, he wants that fan. So I know when he stays, knowing full well that he is hot and really doesn't want to be there, that means that he's trying to take care of me. So things are pretty much back to normal now. He is outside. I gave in to him. It's too late, frankly, for me to be letting him outside. But I popped a flasher on his collar and let him go out, mostly because It's just cold enough so that I'm pretty sure this is not going to be the walkabout night. So he may end up coming in while I'm doing this video. But yes, Audie was feeling betrayed and offended, and I'm still not sure I smell the way he wants me to. And I have no idea how to get rid of the hospital smell short of taking a shower, which I can't do right now. So he's just going to have to put up with me washing as best I can. I know, it's disgusting, isn't it? You know, you go in for surgery and they leave you in a situation where when you really need to be very clean, you're just not able to take a shower. Where's the sense in that? So that's what's going with Audie. He is pretty much getting past it, but we shall see. All right, we're going to take a look at the intro, and I'll be right back. So when I was in the hospital, I had my laptop with me, and I had nothing better to do all day long than watch YouTube videos. So I found a really interesting one done by a little girl who, and I don't mean little girl disparagingly, but you'll see as we go along, a little girl who has no real idea what was going on in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. She's just not old enough. And she was talking about how dating rules have changed over the years. And one of the things I realized is, even though she has no idea what it was like for us, she's right about the fact that things have changed. Because back in the day, when we dated, and I don't need to tell you folks, you are in my generation, you know this is true. So most of this information is for the benefit of our younger viewers. 50s, 60s, even into the 70s. Dating was simply going out with someone, many someones. It was not an exclusive relationship. You were asked out by a boy, because usually that's how it worked, and the two of you went out for a soda, or you went out to a movie, or you went out on a study date to the library, whatever the norm was in your community. And there were no obligations on either side. In general, the boy never spent too much money on the date. It was usually a question of just, whatever a teenage boy's allowance in the 1960s could support. So it would have been a movie, a soda. By the way, movies were a lot less expensive, relatively speaking, in those days. Not just they were a lot less expensive, which they were, but relative to other items in your household budget. A movie was more low cost than it is today. Going out for a burger was literally 15 cents. I can remember the sign on the burger joint across from my junior high school that said home of the 15-cent burger. So things were not expensive, and these dates were not expensive. Many times they would be larger group dates. Everybody would be going out. Or a boy would ask you to go to a party with him. Again, large group. Sex was not even on the menu. In fact, given how old we were when we started dating, and most of us started at, 14, 15, I would have to say by the time we were 16, most of us had been on a few dates. So I'm just throwing that out. Generality, not a hard and fast rule. But you were not expected to be in an exclusive relationship with anyone at that age. Usually, if you started going steady while you were still in high school, your parents were going to sit you down and have a chat with you, because they would have felt that the relationship was too committed, and you were too young to be seeing anyone exclusively. The whole point of this casual dating was to learn some social skills, to go out, to learn how to relate with members of the opposite sex, to have social opportunities within your peer group, and try to figure out what you might be looking for. It was a learning experience. I knew very few people when I was in high school who were going steady. And I can very clearly recall, my own mother wasn't quite so fanatical about it, but I can recall my bestie's mother pulling us aside one day saying, you know she's going steady with a boy. You know I don't want to see either of you doing that. Just, you know. Because, of course, she was afraid that going steady would lead to a more involved relationship than we were ready for. We were still in high school. The idea of getting involved in a sexual relationship at 15, 16, 17 was usually not a part of our general consciousness. Sure, we all knew girls who did it. No question about it. Most of them got talked about behind their backs. Again, no question about it. But we were a lot younger at 16 than kids today. We knew a lot less. Our social lives were a lot more constrained. Our parents' expectations were a lot stronger, and the social expectations that we lived with were more confining. Yes, most of us were expected to eventually come up with a marriage partner out of this dating. If you were from a family that expected you to go to college, their expectation was that it was in college that you were going to meet the future Mr. Right. Mostly because that's why half our parents were sending us to college in the first place. Not because they cared about us getting an education, but they cared about us getting a college-educated husband. And that was just a fact of life. Yeah, marriage was always the number one consideration on everybody's mind. So we were focused in that direction whether we liked it or not. But we were not being pushed to it before, I was going to say before we were ready, but it doesn't matter if we were ready. Before our parents were ready for us to be. Before society was ready for us to be. So dating was casual. You would go out with Billy on Friday night and Joey on Saturday night and Bob on Sunday afternoon, and you were not considered a loosey-goosey. It was considered normal. If you saw the same boy a little too often, that's when people would get a little concerned. You're getting too serious. It's the exact opposite today. Today, girls who are younger than we were go out. Well, I'm not even sure they go out anymore. They spend the afternoon sitting on a park bench together, because that's frankly mostly how it works. Spend an afternoon sitting on a park bench together, and they're going with that boy. In other words, going steady. And this may be their first boyfriend. They are often going steady with the first boy who asks them to share a park bench. Very often they are too young to be going out on dates, even to the local burger joint or the local soda shop. Do they even have soda shops anymore? I don't know. But that's what it is like for them. They are starting off at a much more serious and exclusive level than we ever did. That whole part about playing the field, that has not only become passé, it's actually become something of a derogatory comment. You call somebody a player, and you're basically calling them, a loosey-goosey, whether they're male or female, by the way. A girl that runs around with a lot of different guys, a guy that runs around with a lot of different girls. It's that same stigma these days. So it's different. And if we look at what they are talking about in their dating lives through the lens of our experience, it's like they went from 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. And whatever happened to the casual dating, let's go out, let's get to know each other. When these young people become adults, the dates will often, scary part, often end up in bed. And that was, gosh, to say that was unacceptable for our generation is kind of an understatement. That could turn you into a pariah in 30 seconds. That was the sort of thing that would stigmatize you. So they have very, very different attitudes. For them, sex is much more casual. It's like, like a handshake. It doesn't really mean anything to them. Whereas with our generation, that was like the brass ring. And then you just clutch that close to your heart until the boy was willing to, at the very least, pony up his college pin. But, the fact is it's totally different. Completely different attitudes, different perspective. And as I was thinking about it, there were times when I thought, past tense, that the young people have a much better idea of what's going on. If they're more open about sex, they're far less likely just to get, ants in their pants and go off and get married because of it. And frankly, it's a dumb reason to marry. That's one of the reasons that a lot of people in our generation did get married. They know more about sex, so they're less likely to get caught unaware by, an untimely accident and have to get married because a baby's coming. But even today, you don't have to get married if you're pregnant. In fact, it's to say you don't have to do it is very much an understatement. In general, it's not even as if people are throwing that out there. Gee, you're pregnant, you should get married. They don't even talk about it. It's like, this is fine, this is cool. Now, I have a lot of issues with that because single women raising children has long been the fastest growing poverty group in this country. And I would say, if you want to raise a child today, you really do need two people in the home to share the load. But not my circus, not my monkeys, and has not been my circus for many, many years. So I'm going to let them make their own rules. But I do think in some ways we had it a lot easier, even though there were times when I looked at them and said, oh, maybe it's a good thing that they're experimenting with sex. And so they're not tying this whole mystique up around it and thinking they have to get married in order to have sex, or that if you have sex with someone, this is the person you must marry, no matter what else is going on for you. So I backed away from that opinion. But I do think it was easier for us. We had more rules, and society backed up our rules. We had the opportunity to go out with a lot of different people, a lot of different dates, a lot of different situations in which we could socialize. I certainly took full advantage of that when I was young. Somebody would ask me out, I was like, oh yeah. But that was the other thing, and that's the part people don't usually talk about. If someone asked you out on a date, there was a general expectation that you would agree to go. You would give them the benefit of the doubt and go out with them for an afternoon or an evening, because after all, they had given you the flattery of asking you out. And it wasn't wasn't considered polite to shoot someone down casually. So there was that end that the men would choose, and women were expected to, politely acquiesce. I'm not sure that was such a good thing, and it wasn't always necessary to go along with this, but there was a certain amount of pressure to just say yes. I can remember telling my grandmother once that a boy asked me out, and my grandmother's response was, "This is a good boy, he is in college, he is from a good family, why did you say no?" Like, I wasn't allowed to say no, because it's a nice boy in college, good family, go marry him. That was it. And I remember talking to her about it. We just don't click. I just don't see him that way. He's more of a friend. You'll get over it. Go out with him. So there was a certain amount of pressure. Maybe it was just my grandmother, who knows. But I imagine most of us felt a certain amount of pressure to simply go out with someone because they asked. That you would then go out with them, and if they asked a second time, by then you would have thought up a good excuse that didn't hurt their feelings. So that was another problem, but having said that, we did have the opportunity to engage in a lot of broad socialization, and we had the opportunity to get to know what we were looking for, what were the things that were important to us, and make an informed decision. We were certainly marrying younger. We were raised to be married. If you were a female, like I say, even if your parents sent you off to college, they were basically sending you off to find a college man to marry. They were not sending you off to find a career. In the 60s, a career-bound woman. There was a certain stigma to that. It was, well, you're doing this because you can't find anybody to marry you. Or you're doing this because you don't want to do the normal thing, which is get married and have children. You're so selfish. You're just thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about your parents who would like to have grandchildren. Yeah, you name it. And there were all kinds of family pressure involved in this. And I can remember also in high school that many of us, I'm not going to go so far as to say most of us, this is a period of about 5 years before my era. So if I were 5 years older, I would go so far as to say most of us were getting hope chests. And we were filling those hope chests with linens and bedding and whatever we thought we would need for when we went off and got married. We were planning our married life. Whoa, scary. I'm glad to see the young people with more options. Truly, I am. But I think that they didn't need to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Sure, keep your options open. But going into exclusive relationships from the moment you first start dating is probably not a good idea. It's certainly all of the rationales that our parents fed us about playing the field are still just as valid today. You do want to know your own mind. You do want to see what's out there. You do want the opportunity to explore your options and not just settle for the first person who walks into your life. I would have to say those reasons are still valid. And I look today at young girls who are, going with someone from the moment they decide they like them well enough to grab a soda or a burger together. And they're going together. And that's it. And then you have to break up with them before you go out with somebody else. It's like, why? It's serial monogamy is what it is. All of the relationships have to be monogamous and exclusive. Now, if you throw sex into the mix, it makes sense. Because if you are not in an exclusive relationship and you are sexually active in your relationships in general, somebody ends up expecting a baby and nobody has a clue who the baby daddy is, that's going to be a problem. But I also think the question is not so much of this serial monogamy, which, I don't know, it's another way of doing things, but I think it's a question of sex being a little too much like a casual handshake. The risks that go with sex are not, well, in my day, abortion was legal. Let me start with that. And all of the sexually transmitted diseases you could catch could be cured with a shot of penicillin. The truth is, I lived in a very privileged time. But when you look at that and you say, yeah, even then, we were not quite so sexually open as they are today. We got a disconnect here. Today, sex is extremely casual. You can end up, no matter how good your birth control is, unless you opt for permanent sterilization, you can end up pregnant. You can end up with a sexually transmitted disease that is not going to get cured with a shot of penicillin. Those are the facts. And it does make me wonder why people are not just a little tiny bit more cautious. And I can certainly remember, I remember this because back in the 80s and 90s, and I will say, to be fair, this is with the advent of AIDS. AIDS became a factor in society. In the 80s and 90s, we were getting a little more sexually restrictive than we had been in the 70s. And in fact, probably for the late 60s too. So we had gone from the Victorian mentality of the 50s to the free love, sex, drugs, and rock and roll of the 60s and 70s. The 80s, we started to backtrack a little because of things like AIDS. And now we seem to be back in that late 60s thing. And I have to say, having seen the pendulum swing back and forth a number of times, I would probably say that the mentality that was present in the 80s is the one that I find the best balance between the two extremes. In the 80s, there was no going from no sexual or romantic contact at all, why? Because you were 13, to going steady and possibly moving into the realm of having sex when you were as young as 14, 15, 16. The 80s was a little better than that, a little more sensible. So, I don't know, that's one that I've been giving some thought to. And I figured I would throw that out because I want to hear what you have to say about it. So, please understand my sleeping schedule has been thrown off significantly because I was in a hospital where they woke you up every 2 hours to find out if you wanted painkillers. Like, honey, I was sound asleep. Did I look like I wanted painkillers? So my sleeping schedule's been thrown off, meaning I'm probably going to be able to come back to respond to the comments in bursts and snatches in between my many naps. But I am very interested in hearing your thoughts on this, because I walked away from that little girl's video. Oh, she's a cute little thing too. So don't get me wrong. It's just that not having lived through it, she didn't really understand it. She looks at it. She's from the outside looking in. We were on the inside. So tell me what your thoughts are, because I think that in some ways what we were doing was stupid. A lot of us just got married because it was the only way we were ever going to get out of our parents' homes. Your father would say, yeah, well, when you get married, you can move out on your own. You got a job, I don't care, you're not moving out. there was a lot of that still in society. There was a lot of that whole, if you have sex before marriage, I will disown you. We had a lot of inappropriate restrictions on our lives. And in many cases, the restrictions were quite unnecessary. But on the other hand, we had the time and the social support to play the field, see what was out there, get a sense of what we liked before we started to get pressured into exclusive relationships. And I think maybe that's the thing that troubles me the most about it. Why should a relationship between two young teenagers be exclusive? All right, I am really looking forward to your comments, because who knows? I was in the hospital. I was coming down from anesthetic. Maybe this is a topic that just seemed odd to me because of the state of mind I was in at the time. If you think so, don't be afraid to tell me in the comments. All right, we're going to take a look at a slideshow on the way out. And in the meantime, have a terrific day. And let me just quickly say, thank you all for your good wishes and your positive comments. I am really doing fine. Totally fine. And I'm very grateful for your concern and well wishes. So, till next time.